Long multiplication. Before learning long multiplication, it's important that you feel really confident using short multiplication, and hopefully you will have watched the 3 previous videos on multiplication to learn the correct process. So we're now going to learn a way of multiplying a 2-digit number by another 2-digit number. So what I'm doing is I'm multiplying a tens and units number by another tens and units number, and this is called long multiplication. So let's say we wanted to multiply 43 by 26. Now, before we start doing this question, it's always good to have a very rough estimate about what your answer will be. So a rough estimate would be roughly, we're saying, well, it's roughly 40 times 30, because 43 is close to 40 and 26 is close to 30. Now, 40 times 30 is 1,200. So our answer has to be in that region somewhere. It's a really good idea to do a rough estimate before you start long multiplication. There's quite a lot of different areas you can go wrong in long multiplication, so you need to know whether your final answer is sensible or not. So I'm going to write our estimate up here at the top, just so we can remember that throughout our calculations. So as we did before in short multiplication, we're going to line up the tens and units. I'm also going to give myself a hundreds column. I'm also going to give myself a thousands column, because it's probably going to get into the thousands, isn't it, if our estimate's anything to go by. So we're going to line up in the tens and units the 43 and the 26. Draw myself a line, write my multiplication. I'm actually going to this time draw myself some extra lines, and that will become clear in a moment. So let's start our long multiplication. So I'm going to start like I did before with my bottom units, in this case the 6. Same as before, the 6 is going to be multiplied by the 3, and then the 6 is going to be multiplied by the 4. I'm actually going to write that over here. 6 times 3, and then the 6 times 4, just to remind myself. So 6 times 3 is 18, 8 in the units, 1 on the doorstep, and then the 6 times 4 is 24, plus the 1 is 25. So this first section is done. I've done those two. Now, the next stage, you will notice that different to short multiplication, we've now got this extra 10 here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to multiply this by the 3 and then this by the 4. So I'm doing 2 times 3 and then I'm doing 2 times 4. But there's something important about this 2. It's not actually a 2, is it? You can see here it's in our tens column. So it's actually a 20. So what's important now is that on my second line of calculations here, because it's actually a 20 that I'm multiplying, I'm going to add a 0. And that 0 shows me that I'm actually working with a tens number. I'm not working with a units number. So 2 times 3 is 6, and 2 times 4 is 8. So I've done the 2 times 3 and I've done the 2 times 4. So I've done each stage of my multiplication now. I did the 6 times the 3 and the 6 times the 4. Then I did the 2 times the 3 and the 2 times the 4. So I've now done all my multiplication, but there's one last thing I mustn't forget. I now need to add my answers together. So I've got my first row, 258. I've got my second row, 860, but I need to add those two numbers together. And we can just do that straight like we would do a normal column addition. 8 plus 0 is 8. 6 plus 5 is 11. 8 plus 2 is 10. Plus the 1 is 11. And so the answer to 43 times 26 is 1,118, which we can see is pretty close to my estimate of 1,200. There's lots of steps there to remember, so let's have a try at another question. Let's look at 52 times 73. as I did before, I'm going to give it a rough estimate so I know whether my answer's in the right area. So 52 rounded is to 50, it's close, and 73 is rounded to 70. So if I did 50 times 70, that gives me 3,500. So my estimate, let's put it up here, is 3,500, and I can come back to that at the end just to check whether my answer looks like it's correct. So I've lined up my question in the tens and units columns, and then I'm going to draw myself my extra lines for every stage of my calculation. So remember, starting from the bottom units, I'm going to do 3 times 2, and then I'm going to do 3 times 5. Let's write those down there. So 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 5 is 15. Remember, one number in each column. Now I'm going to be doing the 7 times by the 2 and the 7 times by the 5. So multiplying these two together first, 7 by 2, and then the 7 by the 5. And important to remember here, this 7 is not 7 really, is it? It's actually 7 tens. So really what I'm doing is 70 times 2 and 70 times 5. So I've got to make sure that I write my 0 in the units column to show that it's a tens number I'm working with. 7 times 2 is 14, and 7 times 5 is 35, plus the 1 here is 36. So I've done my first stage of calculations, that was my short multiplication. Then I've done my second stage, so what I mustn't forget now is that I need to add those answers together. So I'm going to do a column addition. 6 plus 0 is 6, 5 plus 4 is 9, 6 plus 1 is 7, 3 plus nothing is 3. So I've worked out that the answer to 52 times 73, whoops, that's not right. Let's get rid of that. The answer is 3,796. Is it close to my estimate? Yes, it is. Let's take it one step further now. Let's do a larger number. So we're going to do 143 times by 25. So here we've got a hundreds number times by a tens and units number. Set it out in the same way we did before. So remembering that we start with the bottom unit, so we're going to do 5 times 3. 5 times 3 is 15. Then we're going to do the 5 times 4. 5 times 4 is 20, plus the 1 is 21. And then this time we've also got the 5 times 1. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7. And that's our first stage of the calculations. So just to recap, we did 5 times 3, then we did 5 times 4, and then we did 5 times 1. Now on to the next stage. Now we've now got our tens number here, so we're going to do the 2 times by the 3, but before we do that we mustn't forget to put our 0 in to show it is a tens number that we're calculating with. So we're going to do 2 times by the 3, 2 times 3 is 6, then we're going to do 2 times the 4, 2 times 4 is 8, and then we're going to do the 2 times the 1. 2 times 1 is 2. And now we need to add them together. So making sure that we don't forget to add both of our calculations here. So 5 plus 0 is 5. And then we've got 1 plus 6. 1 plus 6 is 7. Then we've got the 7 plus the 8, which is 15. And then we've got 2 plus nothing, which is 2, plus the 1 on the doorstep, which is 3. So we've worked out that 3,575 is our answer. And actually what I forgot to do here was we forgot to do our estimate, didn't we, at the beginning? So let's do that now and see if our estimate is any close to our actual answer. So let's do a very rough estimate. If 143, well, the nearest 100 is 100, and then 25 is closest to 30, so a very rough estimate would be 100 times 30, which would give us 3,000, and that is close to our final answer. We're going to look at another question here, 242 times 65, and we'll go through it step by step again so you can remember every stage of the calculation. So first things first, 5 times 2 is 10, and then the 5 times 4, which is 20, plus the 1, which is 21, and then 5 times 2, which is 10, plus the 2, which is 12. So my first set of calculations were the 5 times 2, then the 5 times 4, and then 5 times 2. Now the second row, so now I'm going to do the 6 times 2, then I'm going to do 6 times 4, and then I'm going to do 6 times 2. We mustn't forget though that this 6 is actually 6 tens, so I need to draw a 0 in there to show that it's a tens number. So 6 times 2 is 12, 6 times 4 is 24, plus the 1 is 25, 6 times 2 is 12, plus the 2 is 14. I've done both stages now, so now I need to add them together. So I'm going to do 0 plus 0 is 0, 2 plus 1 is 3, 5 plus 2 is 7, 4 plus 1 is 5, 1 plus nothing is 1. So I've got the answer 15,730. Okay, your turn to practice a couple of more, so have a look at these questions, pause the video, and then we'll go through the answers. Okay, let's go through the answers. So, how did you do? Let's have a look at the first one. 356 times 24. The answer is 8,544. And the second question, 453 times by 82 is 37,146. Well done. Keep practicing long multiplication. It's very easy to make mistakes. It's really good to have lots of practice until you feel really comfortable.